Ah, fuck!
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Mag is empty. Mag is empty. Ow! I dropped the pistol. I dropped the gun!
Man, I do not like that. What is it?
Help me, please.
How are you over here?
That
You were
wasn't
just
really
over
an
there!
image. I'm trapped somewhere terrible.
You're still over there!
I don't know where.
Hello everyone, my name's Epsilon, and today I'll be introducing to you my favorite VR exclusive game. I would call it the best post-apocalyptic VR game on the market, but when that market consists of two games, one of which is Fallout 4, it's hard to call it a competition. Into the Radius is a Slavic life simulator. After the meltdown of a nuclear reactor, a hole is torn in space-time, and now God wants you to make your waifu real by killing him. If this premise sounds familiar to you, then you're either a fan of JRPGs or a fan of the Stalker series, which many people claim this game is just a VR version of. However, they are, in fact, wrong. Why? Because I can actually understand the spoken English in this game.
UNPSC, Explorer 12, log 10-10, Haze anomaly.
Listen to me carefully, sucker. Have you heard the story of Robin Hood? Well, your money went to feed the poor. Forget about it. Try sticking your nose here again, and you'll be crawling back to your mommy.
Typical to the common Slav man, you live in a container home in an old, worn-down Soviet factory. You are forced to do work for the UN who runs this factory because if you don't, they'll gun you down. If you don't like it, then you can just live in the Radius, but trust me, you don't want that. You see, the Radius is the exclusion zone of the Pechorsk nuclear power plant that went into meltdown at the end of the Cold War. You are its sole human inhabitant after all the other explorers of the Radius have gone in and never returned. Your job is to collect artifacts generated by the space-time anomalies created by the meltdown and to gather the logs from other explorers. All the while, the world itself is constantly trying to murder you. A typical day in Eastern Europe, really. You start the game with the ultimate Russian weapon, the Makarov, which is about as effective on the Radius's shadow demons as you can probably imagine. While you may be tempted to use such an overpowered weapon the entire game, I strongly recommend you ditch it as soon as you can, which won't be until you've completed the first couple of story missions. You see, while the game does have a large assortment of weaponry, it is mostly only available through the shop back at your base, which is gated by your security level. Your security level only goes up by completing certain story-related missions. The only other guns you can buy at the start of the game are pistols about as effective as a Makarov and the double-barreled shotgun, which is somehow even worse. If you are trying to shoot at anything further than 2 feet away with it, the buckshot will enter a temporal displacement and vanish from our universe. Either that, or it will somehow backfire, causing your body to develop acute anemia. As such, I would advise waiting until you get to security level 2 before buying any guns. Now, as far as the guns go, I enjoy shooting them more than all other VR shooter games. There's a great deal of realism here, with you needing to load your magazines by hand, chambering your bullets, upgrading and customizing them with optics and other paraphernalia, cleaning your weapon, and clearing jams, which occur more frequently when you neglect the aforementioned cleaning of your weapons. As for the weapons themselves, they are not all made equal. For example, the PPSH isn't made to be suppressed, but you feel damn powerful with one of those, even more so with 2. The M4A1, on the other hand, has 4 rail mounts, all of which can be equipped with a different optic, flashlight, laser, or whatever you want. Or you can equip the exact same optic on all 4 rails if you want to. I'm not here to judge your waste of money. I will, however, judge you if you ever try to attach anything to the Kalashnikov. God made attachments for American weapons, not Russian ones, so don't insult his works like that. Whatever gun you do choose, just remember, ammo costs money, cleaning your weapons costs money, repairing your suppressors costs money, and your missions aren't going to cut it. You think the UN has the resources to spare to just give you what you need? You are neither a Mexican drug cartel nor an Islamic extremist. You'll have to pay for your needs out of pocket, which you'll be making the bulk of your cash by looting crates in the Radius. You'll want to make sure your ventures into the Radius are worth it by collecting all the valuable loot you can until the tide comes. All loot boxes you open and enemies you kill will remain opened and dead until a certain amount of in-game time passes, at which point an annoying alarm will begin blaring from your ass. At this point, you'll experience what is called the Tide, which is the Radius resetting all enemy spawns and re-rolling loot box locations. You will also be teleported to a random part of the map you are in when the tide occurred, unless you are in a safe house or back at the home base. You will then be able to go out and loot everything all over again, but you will also have to deal with the all-new enemy spawns. Hope you've been saving your money to replenish your ammo. Due to a century of poor government management, hunger is always a threat in Eastern Europe. As such, you will need to be on the lookout for food in the radius. Now, if you're not a Gopnik, you may think you need a balanced diet. However, I must inform you ahead of time that the Slavic diet consists entirely of candy bars, canned pineapples, and Spam, with a side of Red Bull. Of course, ask any Soviet government personnel from the time period, and they will inform you that the proletariat never starves to death. So in this game, you also technically cannot starve to death. However, you can sprint in this game, but the more hungry you are, the lower your stamina will be. Luckily, unlike with inferior races, the average Slav gets superpowers by chain smoking, which will help restore some of your stamina as you sprint. Sleeping, on the other hand, will restore your health on most difficulties and is also a good way to pass time. After all, this game is quite terrifying at times, and being the little bitch that I am, I refuse to venture out at night. Just keep in mind that when you sleep, you will probably need to eat a lot when waking up. After all, the drawback for having better stamina after smoking is decreased stamina by sleeping. Speaking of, this game is scarier than most dedicated horror games at times. Nothing is more terrifying than downing an enemy, and then beginning to reload one of your mags, only for a new enemy to suddenly appear behind you, drawn by the gunshots of you killing the first enemy, and start attacking you, while you have your mag pulled out of your gun because you mistakenly thought you were safe. Other times, you'll have to reenact Stalingrad and clear out room after room of enemies, striking the fear of God into you in the process. Just don't worry about committing war crimes in this game. Again, you're working for the UN after all. The only thing you need to make sure is that you don't die. Because when you do, depending on your difficulty settings, you will either lose every item you own, or you will lose your backpack and must go back and reclaim your items before the next tide, similar to a Soulsborne experience. Of course, you could just reload your save, but only a little bitch-ass Glasses-Coon VTuber would ever do that. The AI in Into the Radius is actually exceptional at times. The enemies will use cover, and they will try to flank you. The firefights in this game are the best I've experienced in VR. Even lower-tier enemies may kill you late in the game if you get overconfident and go rushing into a room. You are not John Rambo. You are an explorer. Your job is to explore, find treasure, and not die. Take things slow and plan out your ventures using your map, and things should go well for you at least half the time. The other half being you overlooking some enemies who end up shooting you in the ass, or not realizing that certain anomalies spawn in enemies perpetually until you destroy the anomaly. Something I may have been completely ignorant of my entire first playthrough of the game despite the game mentioning it. I'm bad at reading, okay? Also, I don't like listening to the cassette tapes if that's where it was explained, because half the time they play an insanely loud orchestral soundtrack that scares the crap out of me, and I don't want to risk not being able to hear enemies approaching from behind. Alright, the game's sound design is actually excellent. Guns sound really good, as you would expect from any VR shooter game, but the ambient noises of walking through the radius and hearing the demons of the radius moving or speaking all sound very thematic to the game. The game gets you very immersed in it. The only part of the game I don't really care immersing into is the story. In the tutorial of the game, you are introduced to your waifu, Katya, who was a resident of this town prior to the nuclear meltdown. Her soul is now trapped in the radius, and it's your job to free her. How? I don't know. The UN just keeps giving you important missions until finally you go to an old castle and somehow you get to meet God there. As I said, I'm bad at reading, and most of the lore is explained in these weird pieces of paper that someone sticks in your backpack after each main story mission. Look, I didn't come into the radius to be literate, I came to be Slavic, and Slavic I was for a solid 30 hours. I have now, of course, doubled my playtime from my first playthrough, but this game is truly amazing for a VR game. It also does have some mods, some of which do attempt to make the game more similar to the Stalker series. Some just allow you to subside completely off of loot in the radius by barring you from using the shop entirely, and adding every item from the shop into the loot tables, which is a fun experience. Unfortunately, the game does not have a mod workshop, so you do have to finagle with the mod nexus. The game also has a ton of customization options that allow you to increase or decrease the game's overall difficulty. If you're a busy person, there's an option to increase the money you get from loot. If you enjoy difficulty, you can increase damage taken, enable Iron Man mode, make it so that you lose all your items when you die, decrease intervals between the tides, and many more options. Overall, Into the Radius is an amazing game. If you are into guns, the Stalker series, or VR survival games, I highly recommend you pick it up. While I'm not the biggest survival gamer, I do love both guns and the Stalker games and had zero issues with the survival elements of this game, as they aren't the most in-depth. It was well worth full price for me, but if you're worried about that, then the game's often on sale during Steam holiday sales. I hope you'll get to enjoy it, and then I hope you'll look forward to the sequel whenever it comes out. With that said, I thank you for watching this video, and hope you check out more in the future.